Welcome to Long Lost Friends. I'm Elizabeth Eve King.
And I'm Andrea Goyan. So Elizabeth and I used to do improv comedy together back when we were 19, and we did it in bars. And as she recently said, we'd never got arrested and the bars never got in trouble, but then we lost touch with one another.
Years later, we discovered one another and found out we're both painters,
Performers,
Pilates teachers,
animal lovers.
naturalists.
Elizabeth, I am not a naturalist. I love nature, but I'm not a naturalist.
Well, that counts. The point is,
We're long lost friends. And we're both award-winning fiction writers.
When one of my pieces was published in MetaStellar, we decided to start this show.
So MetaStellar, for those of you who don't know, is an online speculative fiction magazine, and we publish horror, fantasy, and science fiction. There's a link below in case you want to learn more about us. But today, we are delighted to have Rosalind Helfand joining us. So Rosalind is the director of the Omega Sci-Fi Awards. This organization not only offers 4 amazing awards, 2 of which are international, but they also have outreach programs to high schoolers in Los Angeles to help them write and submit their stories to 2 of the award categories. Now, I've been really fortunate the last 2 years to hear the finalist stories for the kids from high school, and they are fantastic. One reason we've invited Rosalind to join us here today is it's a great opportunity to get the word out to writers so that they can submit to the contest, which opens its submissions in September and closes them in December.
Hey, Andrea, can I just interrupt you for a second? I'm just mentioning just briefly that 2 years ago, Andrea won the Omega Award.
I did
mention that.
And that's actually how I really came to learn about the Omega Festival. So I'm so excited I did, because it's such an amazing, I guess, program, right, Rosalind? That's what you called it, a program. So we are just thrilled to have her joining us today. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. But first, do you have any pets you can show us?
Yes, I will show you a photo of my fantastic calico cat, Marzipan. So I'm going to share my screen. And that is the wonderful Marzipan. She's a fetcher. She likes to sit on books and be flown around the apartment and sung to. She learns tricks like vaulting out of the bathtub and over your arm. She's an incredible cat.
Wow. And she's got such a serious, determined look in that picture.
You know, my husband and I both produce a lot. So we produce programs and events and convenings, and we like to joke that our cat is also a producer. So, you know, that expression is not imagined. She actually does direct the household and tells us what we're supposed to be doing next, keeps us on schedule. She's got a great sense of timing, and we love it.
As a good cat should, really. So, so let's talk about the Omega Festival. There are so many, even though I understand a bit about it, there's so many questions I have. How it came to be, how the program for the kids developed, which is so awesome for people who don't get a chance to see it. They can probably still see these kids' stories are amazing, amazing. And you see what the future generations are concerned with right now and what their writing is leading them to write about. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with it, Rosalind.
So I've always done work in literacy and education. And back in the early 2000s, the city of West Hollywood decided that they wanted to found a regional book festival that would serve the entire Southern California region, that would really have more of an independent and innovation-focused theme, as opposed to the LA Times Festival of Books, which is a wonderful book festival, but I would say a little more mainstream. So we wanted more of that indie flavor. And they asked me to work on the co-founding of the book festival. And I became the co-director of the West Hollywood Book Fair, is what it came to be known as. And for 10 years, I directed that festival. But we kind of had different niches, the people who were in charge of this festival, in terms of what were your focus areas. And I've always been a huge science fiction and fantasy fan, and I decided to really take this aspect of the West Hollywood Book Fair under my wing and really reach out to our local science fiction writing and fantasy, and also our comic book and graphic novel writing communities. And even playwrights who are involved in sci-fi writing in Los Angeles, and ask them to come to the table and work collaboratively to develop really fantastic programs in sci-fi with this West Hollywood Book Fair. So flash forward in the early 2010s, there was this playwriting festival called Sci-Fest LA. Wonderful festival, all about original science fiction plays. And the founders of Sci-Fest LA started putting feelers out to find somebody who could be really fantastic to work with them on co-founding a set of short sci-fi story writing competitions. And they had a general idea of what they would like to see. They'd already imagined something along the lines of something for adults internationally and something for teens locally. But it needed to be developed from there. And so my co-director of the West Hollywood Book Fair, Corey Roskin, knew the directors of Sci-Fest LA, and Corey said, you should work with Rosalind. And that's how that came about. So I think I was invited to a party. We said hello. That's the way it works. And we got along really well, and then started meeting and developing these awards. And I had a lot of flexibility to kind of work on the vision for what these prizes should be like. And because so much of my work is also in the arenas of environmental issues and social justice issues and education, I felt that it was really important to bring some of that into our competition to help set it apart from other competitions, but also to really see what we could get in terms of really innovative and great new science fiction. So we founded 4 prizes.
I was going to just ask you, tell us about the 4 different prizes. So yeah.
So our 2 international were the Roswell Award for writers 16 and older who are based anywhere in the world. And the Feminist Futures Award, which this is a special prize for writers 16 and older worldwide. We started this prize a couple of years into the competition, I think 3 years into the competition. We're at about 7, going on 8 years old now. And the reason why is because in the beginning, we felt that it was very, 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 very male dominated. And we were really trying to figure out how to kind of break through that and just at least capture the interest of more women. And so we started a feminist themed writing prize, and it was like magic. We had so many more women who, interestingly enough, didn't just submit to the feminist theme prize, they also submitted more to our general category. So once we had a feminist prize, it increased submissions from women across the board, and we started to get a lot more women who were becoming finalists and honorable mentions. So it worked really well, and we got a lot of innovative literature coming in from that.
Can people submit to both? Can a writer submit to each category or only one?
Only one. So
Okay.
but if you submit your story to the Feminist Futures Award, and there can only be one winner for the Feminist Futures Award and honorable mentions. So if you submit to that and you don't get accepted, your story will still be considered for the Roswell Award, which has 5 finalists, 3 winners, and honorable mentions as well.
Right. So then we've got that category for adults, and then you have the incredible teen program. So tell us about that, because I love that.
Oh, it's so wonderful. So it helps that I already, through my work in literacy and education in the West Hollywood Book there, I already had great relationships and was linked into networks with schools across Los Angeles. And so we were able to build off of those relationships. And the teen competitions are the Tomorrow Prize, and it's only open to high school students. And then we have a special eco-themed sci-fi writing prize called the Green Feather Award. And we have gotten just the most incredible stories coming in from teens. And we do a lot of outreach for this competition. So we spend a lot of time reaching out, especially to public schools, providing as much support as we can for teachers, going into classrooms and hosting science fiction writing workshops, regardless of whether the students are going to submit a story. We want to really engage in these writers' development activities. And I think it's really rewarding because the feedback from the students is usually about it's transformative for them. For a lot of them, it's the very first time that they've had the opportunity to write completely outside of any limits or boundaries. They can go crazy with their imaginations. They can take on any issue that they want. Very early on, we decided on a no censorship policy for our competition. So it can be as gritty and edgy as they desire. And that's not going to stop them from getting considered for an award or having their story read. And this is why the no censorship policy is really important, is because these stories are not just being read by judges. Our big culminating program is that the stories are read for a public audience by celebrity guests in every spring. So that's for all 4 of our prizes. The stories that get recognized are read by these celebrity guests.
So I'm sorry, 4 prizes. So I get there's a feminist one. Now does the Green Feather, is that like a hope punk where they come up with solutions, or they don't have to have solutions? They just.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we specifically asked the teens to make it solutions oriented, their stories. And the reason is because there is so much dystopian, apocalyptic sci-fi and fantasy out there that, and we are specific to science fiction and not fantasy for this competition, but there's so much dystopia, there's so much darkness, there's no hope, and everything's coming to an end, and that's it. And because I also work on climate change issues, I really see a lot of people using the thought that it's too late, we can't do anything, as a reason to not try. And so we really wanted this competition to be something that would get students thinking creatively about solutions and really thinking of themselves, seeing themselves as able to think creatively and imaginatively about solutions. I would say one of the biggest issues today for change is that policymakers and voting adults can't envision how we can get there. And so we need to encourage our youth to really start envisioning that. And it's worked, but we do really work hard with the students in the workshops on getting to that place of being solutions oriented, because I don't think it always comes naturally for the students either. Sometimes they want to go to that dark place and we have to say, no, let's think about. But I would also say, I have to admit that part of my influence is not just the fact that I work on issues like climate change, but I'm a Trekkie. I love Star Trek, The Next Generation. Beyond anything, I've probably watched the series 10 times, like the entire series 10 times. And, I have when I'm working on leadership issues, I kind of have the, what would Captain Picard do? And so because of that, Star Trek is at least the original series and Next Generation, it's all about figuring out how to solve the problems. And it's not an either or, let's find an additional way, right? And so I'm very influenced by that. And I really brought that, as well as kind of that, Gene Roddenberry had a strong philosophy of diversity and culture and the importance of science fiction for helping us to look at a lot of issues. And I've also, I think some of my sci-fi writer influences like Ursula Kay Le Guin and people like that are also really kind of social science fiction oriented, and there's a lot of influence there for me that I think I've brought to shaping these competitions.
And this year did the Roddenberry Foundation just come on this year?
Yes, they did.
They did. So that was
Yeah.
exciting.
But we've always had a lot of support from Star Trek actors. So it's just been incredible how more and more Star Trek actors have gotten involved in not only the culminating readings, but in helping the competitions throughout the year with our fundraising, and people who have made appearances on Star Trek are now on our board of directors. We have an incredible board of directors, and just the support has been amazing. And Gates McFadden, who played Beverly Crusher on Star Trek: The Next Generation, she's been an ardent supporter of our competitions, and so we've been really lucky that way.
And I got to have Nana Visitor read my story, which was fabulous. She was amazing.
Great.
So do you have anything that you would recommend to writers thinking about competing? Any tips you want to tell them about? You're nodding. Yay.
and a little addition, just because I'd like, for me, I'm also curious, there's a Green Feather Award and the Tomorrow Prize.
Yep.
And and then also the Feminist, I think I get, and then the Roswell. And I'm just curious about the difference in them too.
Yeah. Okay. So Roswell Award, international, 16 and over, and it's general science fiction. So we encourage inclusion of social issues and really exploring moral and ethical themes, and just a broad range that you could go into, but it's not necessary. You could just write a complete silly yarn if you wanted to, and it's general science fiction. And Feminist Futures Award is specifically needs to have a feminist theme to it, and a female protagonist. And that's an interesting one, because we've seen a lot of different, and we ask for an intersectional look at feminism, but we have seen a lot of stories come in that kind of mix the idea of just a strong woman, or motherhood as in a very simple way as feminism, as opposed to, yeah, but what about motherhood? And so that's, I think we're still kind of figuring out how to communicate with writers about, how we think about what feminism is, and how you relay feminist themes and stories. But I'm excited to continue to explore that. For the Roswell Award, we choose 5 finalists, and all 5 of those finalists get their stories read by our celebrity guests. And from those 5 finalists, we honor 3 winners. So a first, second, and third place winner. And then we also publicly honor our honorable mentions as well. And for the Feminist Futures Award, we only honor 1 winner of that award who gets their story read. And then we honor a number of honorable mentions. Over to our teen stories for the Tomorrow Prize, it's similar to the Roswell Award. It's just a very general science fiction prize where we encourage exploring these more complex themes and issues, but it's not absolutely necessary either. And again, 5 finalists, 3 winners, honorable mentions. And then for the Green Feather Award, 1 winner of this eco-themed prize, plus recognizing our honorable mentions. Now, one thing that we think is really interesting, though, is, for example, this last year, 50% of our submissions in the adult category were for our Feminist Futures Award. So it's half for the general category, half for the feminist theme. And for the teens, over half of the stories, I'd say 60% of the stories, were for the Green Feather Award, the eco-themed prize. I also want to make sure to give a shout out to, we have a lot of organizations that work with us and support our work. And it's always so important, because this is a community labor of love. We're mostly volunteer run. And the Roddenberry Foundation's support, and VFX Nova and our other supporters has paid for a project coordinator, but everybody else is volunteering their time. And so just a quick shout out to some of the organizations that are helping us out. besides the Roddenberry Foundation, we have Nature Nexus Institute is an incredible environmental organization in LA that works with teens, and they're supporting our Green Feather Award. And Artemis magazine or journal has been a big supporter of our Feminist Futures Award. And LA Parent magazine in LA is also a great supporter of our Tomorrow Prize.
So great. So yeah, I don't know. Every time when I sit down to watch the award ceremonies, I get so excited. It's like, God, I get a little teary even here now thinking about listening to the kids' stories. It's so moving. So give us some hints for writers who want to enter.
Well, so first of all, it's very important to know that it's a 1,500 word limit. So it's very, very short stories. And a lot of writers struggle with doing a story that really stands on its own in that word limit. And so some writers end up resorting kind of to structural gimmicks in order to meet it. So just really falling back on the journal writing style, for example. Somebody's keeping a journal, or it's a time travel story, and it's time stamped, and so that they can keep it in short segments. The problem with that, though, is that not that those don't have merit as styles, but so many writers just start to fall back on that the stories that really do manage to achieve being a standalone story within that word limit are the ones that really stand out as a result. So it is doable, and we've had plenty of incredible stories like yours, Andrea, that have really, really managed to shine beautifully within that word limit. And so that's something that I would encourage writers to do, is go for a story that can stand on its own and be a full narrative piece without having to break it into little chunks. The other thing is that a lot of stories don't have a clear ending. And so having a strong ending, now that doesn't mean you have to have a typical ending, and then everything was done, the end. It can't feel like it's the first chapter in a novel. So if your story feels like, I can see a cliffhanger working sometimes, but this honestly feels like it's the first chapter in a novel, it's probably not going to go quite as far. Some writers resort to just keeping it extremely short. So we have a 500 word minimum. And so some writers decide to make it very much like the shortest possible piece of flash fiction that they can. Those usually don't work. Although one of our winners one year, I think, was only 850 words. So it certainly doesn't have to be the full word length to be a winning story. But most of the time when writers are trying to keep it so short, it ends up feeling like it could have been filled out more, or there's something more that could have been done. I think that a lot of this is an international competition for the Roswell Award and the Feminist Futures, and we do get a lot of writers who attempt to write a very American, old school American style stories. They're not writing from their experience, or perhaps something that's a little more informed by their locality, or different cultures. And as a result, the stories can sometimes end up feeling like that somebody's trying to make something that's just not them, that they have no relation to, and it's kind of mimicking an American blockbuster sci-fi film. And so it's really, really important for writers to dig deep and really think about, what's a story that's more unique to you, and ideally more unique to your culture, your locality, or your experiences. Because one of the great benefits of having an international science fiction writing competition like ours, which honestly our competition I think is a little more literary in nature than some other science fiction writing programs, is that there's a lot of reward for talking from your experience, from showing off culture. And we have such fantastic judges who give their time for the competitions. Our judges are novelists themselves, they're editors, they're bookstore owners, they're librarians, they're screenwriters, publishers. So a really fantastic group of judges who are they're highly screened, but at the same time they're very passionate about this. And so it's a great opportunity to have your work read by very thoughtful people.
And how many submissions have you? I'm sure you've been growing year to year, but how many about do you get a year for those two?
Well,
those
you mean for the international prizes? So for the international prizes, it dipped a little bit during the pandemic. So, but I would say like pre-pandemic, it's probably around 500 story submissions. We do very targeted outreach. So we do outreach through writing groups, through universities. We're trying to expand our international outreach, but it is growing. So it's a good time to get in on the competitions.
So and you do not charge for your competition. There's no fee, right?
It's free.
And do you plan to keep that? Do you need, I mean, as it grows, is it going to be able, do you think you'll be able to?
Yeah, so there are costs to running the competition, and our ability to keep it free depends on having sponsors return. So we're getting ready to reach out to the Roddenberry Foundation again and ask if they are able to come back and support us for another year. But every year there's that discussion with our board of directors about, do we need to charge for submissions this year? And every year we end up saying, no, we really, really want to keep this free and open to everybody. It's very important to us that this be something that's incredibly accessible. So we're not charging, and we hope to keep it that way.
Yeah, it's one of the rare competitions out there like that right now. So it's amazing. And for people who want to, I mean, this is just for Los Angeles right now. Maybe one day you'll outreach to other high schools. But I know an awful lot of high schools that are not part of your program, that don't get involved. How do you outreach there, and can they reach out to you?
Well, we would love for the high schools to reach out to us. We have communications that go out to all Los Angeles County high schools. And then in addition to that, we do targeted communications to principals and teachers as well. We definitely saw a dip during the pandemic. So I'd say the past 2 years, there's been kind of a little bit of a dip with submissions. But I think we're coming roaring back at this point in time. I think some of our challenges have been, one is that in LAUSD, so the Los Angeles Unified School District, there was a decrease in emphasis on fiction writing and more of an emphasis placed on nonfiction writing. Yeah. Two is that our competition requires that stories pretty much be written during the fall. And so sometimes teachers don't plan on, they have a very set curriculum, and they don't plan on doing fiction, if they are doing fiction at all, until the winter or spring. And so basically we have to go through this process of getting teachers to not just share passively the information with their students about the competition, which they do. A lot of teachers just say, hey, there's this competition, if you want to submit, go for it, blah, blah, blah. And that's it, right? And maybe they invite us to do a writing workshop, and we come in, and then they encourage the students to submit, but they don't make it a project of the class. So where we see the most success is where teachers more closely work with their students, and not only encouraging them to submit a story, but following up with the students, helping them to go through the editing process, kind of offering some coaching. And that's where we've seen some of our best success for students in this competition, because it requires a lot of very original thinking on behalf of the students. And it's to get going with that, I think it can be a little bit of labor for the students to really, as writers, you have to kind of build that momentum as you get into your stories, and then you hit a certain point and you can be like, you start chugging along with it. and helping high school students who haven't done this kind of writing before to get to that point, to be like, okay, I know what I want to write, go, go, go. That is something that requires some support from the teachers or parents in their lives usually. Sometimes students really just, they're very self-motivated, and we've had some winners who just did it because, hey, I'm a super self-motivated young writer, and that's great. But I think it's really important because students are under so much pressure and they have so many things that they're being asked to think about, and being able to provide that additional support is so helpful. I think one of our biggest successes this last year is that when we led creative writing workshops with students, we did both virtual and in person, and we just decided to go full on for the kind of using science fiction as a lens for social and environmental issues with the students, and do writing prompts with them around that. And what we did first with the students is we asked them to do a brainstorm about social issues they care about and environmental issues they care about. And then we walked them through a process of, okay, but how do you turn that into a science fiction story as a lens to kind of think more deeply about these issues? How could you do that? And as a result, one of our winners this last year was a story called Backstitching. Amazing, amazing story from a teenager who really wanted to explore exploitation of labor in the garment industry and use science fiction as a way to explore that. And the story just stood out because nobody had ever seen, none of our judges had seen a story quite like hers before.
Yeah,
and
it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, and it was really different. And because our competitions are geared towards emerging writers at different stages of their careers, so some of our emerging writers are more experienced than others, but you're not Larry Niven yet, so something like that. But because we're geared towards emerging writers, for our teenagers, that meant that it's okay for your story to not be perfect, but it can have a lot of this incredibly powerful innovation going for it that earns it an award. And that's what we saw there.
Yeah. Wow. Do you think that, or do you hope at some point to be able to open some of the teen stuff more nationally or internationally? Or do you think it's got to stay small?
It doesn't have to stay small. I do think there is merit to having a localized competition. There's merit to being able to reach out to your community and work very closely with a community. I'm from Los Angeles, and this is my home. I live in Hollywood now, and I'm deeply embedded with the Los Angeles community. So I have an understanding of the community that I'm able to bring to the competition as its director. And there's a lot of merit to that. However, I also think if we were to get a lot more funding for our work, yes, absolutely. We had the funding to pay a staff to start taking this out nationally and engaging other cities and maybe localizing it with other cities and replicating this model to some extent. I think that could be incredible. And I think though that we would need some foundations or philanthropies that really want to, they see the merit to this and they want to invest in us. And honestly, whether it's for the international competition or the teen local competition, there is so much merit to supporting the thinkers of the future and to supporting creative and imaginative thinking. And we really need funders who get that and believe in it and see the potential of the work that we're doing and want to support it.
Yeah, I keep thinking, that both like setting up almost chapters in different places. So it continues, it's connected, but it's local. So that you get that one-on-one. And personally, like, I think it would be really exciting because I've done a lot of work with children and art and science programs, is to have like some science and writing workshops. So they're getting actual, science ideas that they can incorporate into their stories. That would be a really exciting thing. I just thought of it. I'm like, I want to help.
Yeah. One of our high schools that they didn't participate this last year, but they do usually participate, is High Tech LA. which is a high school that, just the way it sounds, high tech LA, they have a more technical focus to a lot of their programs. But they have a robotics program. And in the past, the teacher who leads the robotics program wasn't the English teacher who was encouraging the students to submit stories. It was the robotics teacher. And so it was really interesting because you did, in that case, see a science-oriented teacher working with students on submitting stories and bringing the science that they were learning into their stories. And that was fantastic. And for the Green Feather Award, we have had environmental science teachers working with their classes to submit stories to this competition. And we love this cross-disciplinary approach and getting teachers across the board to really see merit to say, hey, let's bring these. I'd love for the history teachers to be involved. And and there are so many possibilities there.
I mean, and science and art are so, to me, they're so much the same. You see something, you come up with an idea, and then you have to prove it or make it or whatever. It's to me, they're very similar. I mean, there's obvious. So, I mean, that's why it's like you're saying, it's so important to develop people to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question that you may have answered, and I may just be, extremely dense, as we know. But so it seems like both the Roswell Award and the Tomorrow Prize are pretty much open in terms of what you can write about, any science thing. And it's only the Feminist and the Green Feather that have more of that direction. So what if somebody submits to one and you think, well, wow, this would be better in the Green Feather. Do you ever, do you move them over, or do you just see what I mean?
We don't move them on our own. So we specifically ask. I think, Andrea, I don't know if we asked you if you wanted, no, we didn't. Because your story you submitted for the Roswell Award, but it would have also been a great candidate, we thought, for our Feminist Prize. And so occasionally we ask writers if they would like their story moved to the specialty prize, or the specially themed prize. And but we ask them before we do that and say, did you mean for your story to be submitted for the general category? Would you like for it to be considered for the specially themed category, and give them that option?
And now that you bring that up, I actually have to say, when I went to submit, the idea of what was categorized as feminist was a little unclear to me. Like you said, you're still working on that kind of, and I thought, is it feminism, or is she just a strong protagonist? So
yeah. And I think something that writers are really working on getting their heads around is we really want complex stories around feminism and complex characters. And what does it mean to have a more complex feminist story? And I think that that's something that we're still very, very much exploring as a competition. But my current job is I consult, and I'm the UN Women's thematic lead on feminist action for climate justice. And so my job title includes feminist action in it. So I tend to be very committed to that. On the other hand, I do have we have a working board of directors and not a fundraising board. They very, very much work closely on the development of the competition and revising it and updating it each year. And I have a huge amount of respect for their expertise and opinions. And so I don't make these decisions alone. We actually convene our board and have some pretty deep philosophical discussions each year about where do we want to go with this? What does it mean? Are we communicating it well enough? And we'll be having some of those conversations in August.
So, I mean, it's so wonderful. And now more than ever, gosh, do we need you? But can I just ask, how do you keep from getting a little depressed with the current climate? And I don't mean literally necessarily climate, but also literally both.
Yeah, I think so I'm pretty deeply in it in terms of I have to read all the reports. I've been an expert reviewer for the IPCC and for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and just reviewing the reports. And so I'm very, very deeply aware of everything that's happening on a daily basis. And I have to read everything and be up to date. So, but here's the thing, is that making a difference only requires enough people being committed to change. And it only requires enough people willing to make some sacrifices. And when I say people, I usually mean the developed, industrialized world, like the people who consume the most, whose emissions are the greatest, and who have the most power, honestly, saying, you know, no, this has got to be different. This is an emergency and we're going to act like it. And so a lot of my work is geared towards getting us to that tipping point of being willing to make the big changes and push for it. And, you know, there are governments and corporations that stand in the way, but at the end of the day, those are people too. And we have the ability to say no to other people. And they're not some, you know, monolithic entities that we have no power against. And but I think there is that feeling that we don't have power. There's that feeling that we can't make change. And I think that feeling is in some ways very engineered. We're made to feel through some pretty subtle marketing and campaigning. Oil companies, for example, pour many, many millions of dollars into a lot of messaging to get Americans to think that we can't survive without fossil fuels. And these are some pretty powerful, very sophisticated campaigns that they engage in. But we have the ability to push back. And so I guess that's where my hope is that we can keep pushing it to that point where people are willing to make the changes and are ready to say no. And that's what I'm working with every day. And also I'm working with hundreds of people from all over the world who are all on the same page and all want things to be better. And I'm very political, so I'll go ahead and say, you know, everybody's really frustrated, or progressives in America are very frustrated that there hasn't been more action on climate change. Well, that really comes down to bad actors in the US Senate right now. Like, it's not even about the Supreme Court and their ruling that the EPA can't regulate emissions as much as we would like them to. It really comes down to Congress. And I think we're able to say, you know what, let's get behind turning over our congressional and Senate leaders. No more Joe Manchins, no more people who run as progressives and then block every piece of change. I mean, arguably some of the more conservative things that the Biden's doing in terms of going after fossil fuels right now because of gas prices going up in the US is because other avenues that he tried for change were blocked by people like Manchin. So we need to open up those avenues. And I was at a breakfast the other day where somebody asked me, they said, I just feel like we can't do anything about climate change and we just can't do anything. What are we going to do? And I said, well, you have to get politically involved. You have to start following legislation, talking to your political leaders. You're going to have to personally engage on these things. And they said, but can't I just give money? Well, you know what? Donations are important, but no, I think it's a hard no. You can't just give money. You have to do. And that's really where we're at right now.
That's great.
Thank you so much for coming today and joining us. I mean, we're going to talk some more. I know we're going to talk to you some more about all that other stuff. So is there anything else you want to tell us about the Omega Festival before we end? Is there anything that we missed?
Yeah, I think it's important to us. You know, it started out as a competition about 8 years ago. And now it truly is an annual program. And so much of what we do is around the development of our writers. And so much is around this idea that science fiction is such an important avenue for developing imaginations, but also building confidence and in not just writers, but thinkers. And we've been so heartened to have such great participation from our science communities too. For example, we opened up, as you know, Andrea, the teen readings this year of the top stories with a theremin player. And this theremin player, Steve, he is a top engineer at Jet Propulsion Laboratories, who also is a performer and a theremin player. And he was delighted by this opportunity to bring together the arts and science in celebration of these teen writers. And we're about building community, and we just really encourage people to not just submit to the competition, but if you're interested in finding more ways to engage in reaching out to us about that too.
Oh, yeah. I encourage everybody. It's fantastic. So
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so much good stuff. It's art, it's writing, it's feminism, it's environment, it's hope. I guess more than anything, it's hope,
Yeah.
you know, and I worked on a choral project this last winter that I have talked about occasionally, but I guess one of the big things was just hope, seeing it actually, it makes a difference. You can, it fights against that thing that we can easily get into of, I can't do anything. And it's so easy to go there, especially I think in these times and being cut off from people sometimes with pandemics and what have you. So this is like the antidote. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing is you asked me to maybe bring what I'm reading right now. So I did. So I'm going to hold up what I'm reading right now, which is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. So I think I'm reading it for the fourth or fifth time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorite books. And
Is it? Okay. I haven't read it.
and have you read it, Elizabeth?
No,
No?
but you're gonna inspire me. Virginia Woolf,
Yeah.
I have to tell you, is one of those writers I always, sort of, no, don't read very
So the
much.
great thing about Orlando is it has a subtle sci-fi or fantasy twist to it, which I won't tell you what it is, but
Okay.
it's so beautifully woven in there that I like to kind of talk about it as this kind of sneak attack sci-fi novel.
Nice.
But highly recommend it.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Well, I'm really interested. So I
Yeah.
am going to make that after my next one. And we usually end each section, in fact, we always end each section with the best thing I learned this week, which is not personal necessarily, can be, but more, So I have actually 2 or 3 this week. So I'm going to go really fast. First, the best thing I learned this week, Andrea won another fiction prize.
Oh,
Hello,
thank you.
and
Oh,
she may not-
congratulations.
So
Thank
yes,
you.
so that was pretty exciting. So okay, that's one of the best.
Thank
But also I want to give out a shout to Lalaware Company. They are innovators in plastic, redoing plastic. They're using seaweed. They've made totally recyclable straws, and they're just really innovators in using seaweed instead of plastic. So I think they were like, that was pretty much one of the best things I learned this week.
Oh, you're done? I thought you were doing 3.
Can I
Oh.
can I add one more?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right.
Mine
This
are
is just
short.
what I'm reading this week. I was very excited. I've been waiting to start this book. It's called Bitch. It is biology from a more, I don't want to say a feminist perspective. It's just from a biology perspective. It's just so much of our biology was written by men starting in the, Victorian age when they had blinders on. And like, in fact, in the Chicago Zoo, there's a display of lions, and it shows the females with the cubs and the male lions out hunting. And then there's a little plaque saying, well, we designed this in the 50s when this is what we thought all groups were like, all mammal groups at least. And we discovered actually females are the fighters, but we don't have enough money to redo our exhibit. So this is like a social exhibit now. And so Bitch is a really, I'm enjoying it. It's great. There's a lot of good stuff. However, I've also just got to say, before Bitch came Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice to All Creation. And it's my favorite book. If I had to be on a desert island with one book, it would probably be Dr. Tatiana, because I could just read it over and over. And she's funny, but she also makes you, I mean, some of the science that was done incorrectly because maybe they didn't give it long enough time. Maybe they only tested fruit flies for 2 weeks instead of a month. And they thought all these things about the way females work that are wrong. And so, yeah, I don't know, just shake a fist or something.
Good. Okay, I was going to say, I think the most exciting thing of the week was the James Webb Space Telescope and all those fantastic pictures, because just talk about science fiction. There you go, right there, all those pictures to write from. And then I was going to, which was the other one I was going to tell you. Oh, I know. It kind of goes in with what Rosalind was talking about. I was happy. California, I guess, has passed this law, but also my little town of Burbank now, we've changed our green recycling. So now you can put all of your kitchen garbage in, meaning all your cuttings, your bones, your paper products that are soiled, all can go into one bin now. So it'll be recycled into made into soil. So that's cool. Tiny little thing.
So much good stuff coming out of California. It's really fantastic. Yeah.
Do you have anything to share, Rosalind?
Yeah, well, okay. So I'm a biology nerd, and I love community science, and I have an iNaturalist account and document every single bit of wildlife that I see. But they have an iNaturalist blog, and with fun observations that people have had each week. And so I'm going to share one of the most recent observations and tell you about it, which was it's a picture of a large stink bug on a leaf, and behind the large stink bug is a very small stink bug, and the small stink bug is sticking out its proboscis into the large one, and what it's doing is it's eating out the insides of the big stink bug. And so I did not know this, because many stink bugs eat plants, and they use their mouth parts to suck out the juice in plants. But in this case, some stink bugs, like this one, are predatory on other stink bugs, and they eat out the insides of the other bugs instead.
Are they in the same? Are they the same? Would it be genus? Are they the
same?
same?
Yeah. So they're both in that stink bug group, but they
different variety,
different species. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Wow.
That may be the best thing you learned this week, but it's certainly not the best thing the big stink bug learned.
No, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not for the big stink bug, but yeah.
So okay, sorry, I have to get into the minutia of this a little bit. So the little stink bug, does it just attach itself and go along for a ride and eat the big stink bug, or does it paralyze it?
Okay, I'm going to see if I can pull this up for you really quickly so you can actually look, because I think that might be most helpful. Let's see.
Maybe it's just like a little, sip on the way by, just like, hey, we have a little bite.
Let's see.
That's very strange. Well, if you don't find it, you can send it and we'll stick it in the on the video.
Yeah, I'm looking for the they usually have a blog post, and I'm not seeing it right now, but if I find it, I will definitely show it to you guys.
Yeah, perfect.
Wow.
Okay. Thank you again for joining us.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Maria Korloff, for being our producer, and Sydney Levinson for cutting everything together and making it look good. And thank you so much, Rosalind, for being our guest. This is
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we also would like to say to our viewers that if you like this, please go ahead and like it on the video and leave comments for us so we know what you're thinking, and subscribe to our page. Hit the subscription so you won't miss out on future notifications for episodes. And if you want to support MetaStellar, the publication, you can visit our Patreon page. And similarly to the Omega Festival, all the money goes to the writers, in the sense that everyone who works here is a volunteer. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.